Okay, well, it's 12:01, so we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll let folks in as more people join us. But I will be recording today's webinar, so if you have questions that you want to go back to, that you'd like to review, you're welcome to do that. I will share that out on our website, and I imagine that will be available in about a week or so. I'll work with our communications persons to help with that. So with that, we'll go ahead and just jump in. I'm going to take off my the view of the videos right now. So again, I won't be able to see you. You don't need to put on your camera at this point. What I'd like to do is we do have a lot of information to cover in the next hour. So as I go through the material, if you have questions, if we could save those to the end, or if you want to put those in chat, we will definitely have time at the end to answer questions. So you can put it in chat to remind yourself, or at the end, I'll turn our camera back on and the chat function back on, and you actually would be welcome to unmute your mic at that point to ask questions as well. So I'm happy to answer questions. We're going to be covering a lot, but I'm happy that you're here. So thank you for joining. So my name is Amber Webb. I am the Family Consumer Sciences Extension Agent for Larimer County. And I've been with Extension for about 4 years. My background is in food science, human nutrition, and I've been preserving for about maybe the last 10 years or so, off and on. But this is such a wonderful topic for this time of the year because everything is in season, right? August, September, we just have such an abundance of beautiful produce from home gardens, the farmers markets, what's available in the grocery stores. So hopefully this will give you some really great confidence and answer some questions for you to jump into this preservation method. So we're going to be talking about 6 basic kinds of the jam jelly category. And you can see there's quite a lot actually to consider if you've never heard of any of these categories before. So we're going to go over briefly each of these and then the overall method for making them. So the first one is a jelly. Now a jelly is a strained fruit juice with no solids present. So you can see here, here's a great photo of like a jelly bag. So you would have boiled fruit, you would have put your ingredients in there, and then you're going to strain that off. And so all you get is a clear liquid. It's going to come out clear and firm. It's going to hold shape when it's cut, but it's not going to be tough. And so you would need a classic setup like this in order to make a jelly. Now, jams are a little bit different. So they have a little bit less firm texture than jelly does. It doesn't hold its shape when it's turned out of a jar. So it is going to be a lot softer, but it's really thick. You're basically just using chopped, crushed, or mashed fruit, and then a couple other ingredients we'll talk about. So the texture of it is a little bit different. Okay, you're using the fruit and the juice combined. Now, a preserve is something that you would have included in it, a small whole fruit or uniform cut pieces of that fruit. You're also going to have a clear jellied syrup within that preserve, and it is going to retain shape as well, a lot better than a jam would. And then we get to marmalades. So marmalades are considered a soft jelly, but that jelly also has small pieces of fruit that are evenly suspended in it. And so my classic marmalade that I think of is like an orange marmalade. So you'll see slices of that orange or ground pieces or other kinds of fruit peels as well. I recently had a lemon marmalade that was fantastic. Now, there's also a category called conserves, and this can also be thought of as like a chutney. So it's a jam made from a combination of fruit. So you might see a couple different kinds in it. It also might have nuts or raisins or coconuts. It has a really interesting texture to it and can be delicious with things like meats. All of these really could be delicious in a variety of settings, but you probably already know that. So butters are also a category that are kind of within this larger practice of making jams and jellies. So a butter is a fruit juice and the fruit juice pulp typically with it that's concentrated with sugar. That concentration is coming through evaporation of water, pretty simple. You might see added spices in it, but there's a variety of ways you can do this. You can cook a fruit butter on a stovetop, in an oven, in a microwave, or even a crock pot. And believe me, your house is going to smell amazing, no matter what method you'll be using for each one of these categories. So for all of the things that we just talked about, really, you're going to have 4 ingredients in common. And that is fruit, acid, sugar, and pectin. Now, one thing that I want to mention at the beginning of all of this is that these 4 ingredients must be in correct proportions in order for gel to occur. So reducing or increasing any of the ingredients in a tested recipe is most likely going to is going to result in a runny, weak gel. So that's a critical stage in that, okay? Now, fruit contributes to some of the pectin and the acid that's needed for gel formation. And natural fruit acid and pectin contents are highest in underripe fruit. And then the levels of that pectin and acid decrease with ripeness. So that is something to consider depending on what kind of fruit or what kind of recipe you're going to have for your project. So you want to make sure that the fruit is just at that ripe stage for best color and best flavor. And you want to make sure that it's free of any damage or decay. You don't need to use perfect fruit. So seconds, you're going to see a lot of at the farmers markets. Those are great. You can absolutely use those. Just make sure that you cut off any of that decay or damage before you get started. You don't want any of that in your product. If you don't have fresh fruit available, or if you have frozen fruit from an earlier project, you can absolutely use that. You just want to make sure there's no added sugar in that before you start with the recipe. Now, acid is also necessary in this because it helps with flavor and it helps with gel formation. Now, something that I want to mention is that fresh lemon, so you're most likely going to see fresh lemon juice, lemon juice in your recipes. However, you don't want to use fresh lemon. And that's because the acidity of fresh lemons is unknown, depending on where it's grown, the soil that it grows in, the climate, all of that can affect pH. And so when you're doing something as precise as food preservation, you want to make sure that you're getting it bottled because you know that pH concentration, and you're going to get a consistent product after that. If you see a recipe that calls for fresh lemon juice, it's most likely there for flavor and not for gel formation. So it might be in addition to like the 5 tablespoons that you need, okay? Now, sugar is the next ingredient. Sugar adds flavor, it adds sweetener, and then proper proportions again with pectin and acid help it to gel. And you don't, that's one of the reasons that you don't want to reduce any amounts of sugar, because that sugar binds water to form that proper gel. It also acts as a preservative by binding water to make that any growth of microorganisms and it not possible. It inhibits that growth. And so it actually is a very important ingredient. Now, I get this question a lot, so I'll just stop and I'll just mention it here. You can replace some sugar with honey if you're interested. But with recipes that have no added pectin in them, you can replace half of the sugar with honey. And in recipes that do have added pectin in them, you can replace a quarter of the sugar with honey. Now, I can send that out to you if you didn't get that written down. I can make sure you get that. And then just understand that whatever product that you make is going to have a little bit darker color and a little bit different flavor using some honey substitute instead of sugar. Okay. Now, the last ingredient you're going to need is pectin. Now, there's a couple different methods for pectin we're going to talk about. So we have a few slides to work through. So if you have questions, maybe wait a few slides and I will maybe I'll be answering your question. So pectin is naturally occurring plant fiber in all kinds of fruits and vegetables, really, but it helps your fruit to gel into the product that you want to make. Now, some fruits like apples, lemons, blackberries, they contain enough natural pectin to make your own gel. And that would be a great candidate for some of the things we were talking about, a jam or a jelly. But not all fruits are going to work that way. And so you may want to use a commercial pectin, okay? Now, there are a couple different kinds of pectins that are available to you. So there are pre-measured packets of pectin. Some are dry powders and some are liquid form. So depending on what you're interested in trying, we don't really recommend one strongly over the other because there's so many great products out there that are available to you. And it really is just up to you what you're interested in. Now you see here, there's also a Ball Real Fruit Pectin Flex Batch. And what that means is that it's a jar of powdered pectin. And a lot of times in a recipe, it will call for 1 packet of pectin, but other recipes will call for like 5 tablespoons of pectin or 6 or something like that. If you get a jar of pectin, you can just measure out the tablespoons that is required in a recipe. What's really interesting also is there is this flex batch specifically. So you might just get instant pectin and that's fine. This flex batch comes with a table or a calculator is what we're calling it. On the label itself, you just peel off the label and there's a calculator of a table of different recipes that give you different quantities, or like one recipe gives you quantities of how much you want to make. So let's say, like, for instance, you look at a recipe and it says this recipe yields 4 half-pint jars. And so you need 4 cups of fruit, you need 2 cups of sugar, you need 5 tablespoons of pectin, for example, and that's it, that's your recipe. And we say we do not want you to change that original recipe. Don't double it, don't do anything like that, because it can really affect your final product. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But this product specifically will give you 1 to 10 jars worth of ratios. So for instance, in my class tomorrow, we're going to have a hands-on class and we're going to make blueberry jam. And I think I have 6 people in that class registered so far. And I always like to make a couple extra. So I'm going to go to that calculator and say, I want 8 jars of blueberry jam. And it will give me the quantities for all of the ingredients that I need to make 8 jars of jam. And most recipes are not going to give you that flexibility. So this is just a product worth looking into if you have varying quantities of fruit available to you. Now, there are pectins that are low or reduced or no sugar pectins. They are in powdered form only. And what's important in that pectin is it does help with low gel formation with low sugar concentrations. So you need to make sure that you're using that product specifically to what the recipe says, okay? So that you're following that correctly and you get a high quality product as possible. That was a mouthful. Okay, so that's using commercial pectins. Okay, so I mentioned briefly before, there are some fruits that are great for using no pectin at all. And some people like to use no pectin in some recipes and then pectin in others. So for example, if you have great access to an apple tree and you want to try an apple spread without pectin, that would be a really great place to start. And what that's called, without using pectin commercially, is the long boil method. And that's just using the pectin that's naturally present in that fruit. And you just need to make sure that you're using the right amount of fruit that has different levels of ripeness. So you can see that here, 3/4 ripe to an un-quarter ripe fruit. It's going to take a little bit longer to cook because you are trying to reach that gelling point. And then when you are at the recipe point where you've boiled it and then you want to test for its gelling and how well it's gelled, there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can do that with a sheet or spoon test. And you can see here, that's just dipping the cool metal spoon into the boiling mixture, raising it, kind of holding your spoon out to the side to see how it's running down the side. Now, this is a really precise thing. So on webinar, it's not going to be really that easy to explain. It really has to be done in person. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but the instructions are there in the recipe. If you're going to do a long boil method, it will all be there for you, okay? And I'm sure that you can find videos online that show you the specifics of long boil method, because you can also, as you can see here, test for temperature using a candy thermometer, or you can do a refrigerator test or a freezer test. And that's all checking on the gelling and how well something is gelling before you're ready to can it, okay? Now, something else I want to mention, there are also freezer jams and jellies. There is a product called freezer jam pectin, and it's made specifically for recipes that are supposed to be eaten right away, like in your refrigerator, or if you want to freeze it in a freezer safe container for later. Now, you can use a specialized freezer jam pectin for this purpose, or in the pectin package inserts that you can buy. Those are definitely trusted resources. Most of those will also give you ratios for a freezer jam. So you don't have to use freezer jam pectin. That's specifically for if you want to use a lower sugar recipe, you can use freezer jam pectin. It's not going to require as much sugar. If you're not concerned about the sugar and you want to just do a freezer jam regular recipe, you can use just a typical instant pectin, and it'll give you the freezer quantity on it. Hopefully it's a little bit confusing, but hopefully if you have any questions, I can clarify that for you again, okay? So for example, if you don't have a specific freezer jam or a freezer jam pectin recipe, this is what a typical one would look like. So this came out of Ball Blue Book, and this was specific for a blueberry jam. So you can see here, you would need 5 cups of fruit to 2 cups of sugar, and then 6 tablespoons of instant pectin. And all you do is combine that sugar and pectin, you blend it well, and then you stir in your crushed fruit for 3 minutes, and then that's it. You ladle it into freezer containers or canning jars and let sit for 30 minutes to thicken, and then it's ready to go. You just can refrigerate and eat it up to 3 weeks, or you can freeze it for up to a year. So hopefully that shows you how simple making a jam or a jelly can be. And so if you get like a small quantity of something, this is a perfect place to start. And start a project like this without having to heat up the kitchen and do the whole 9 yards. I would highly recommend this. And there's some really great recipes out there for you. Okay, I'm going to take a quick sip of water here. Now, like I said before, it's really critical that you review and you use tested recipes and instructions. So what that means is if you're considering canning it, you're preserving it for later, it's really important that you're using a good resource because we live here if you're joining us from Colorado, you might be out of Colorado, but anywhere you live in Colorado is above 3,000 feet. And above 3,000 feet is considered at altitude, above altitude, and you need to adjust altitude for your canning time. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But so you can't just grab a random jam or jelly recipe out of a popular magazine and try to can it. That's really the point that I'm trying to get to. You need to make sure that it's tested for altitude, that it's from a reliable source. Otherwise, you could make a jam or a jelly from something like a popular magazine or a website that you don't know where their recipe is coming from. If you're going to use it in your refrigerator for a couple weeks and eat it, quickly, it's not being preserved. It's just for home use. Then that's fine. So just make sure that you're getting really great produce. that you have uninterrupted time for canning, and then make sure that you assemble all your equipment. So with the resources I was just mentioning, I wanted to show you, I'm going to turn my camera on just back on for a second, a couple of the resources. So CSU Extension has a website called Food Smart Colorado. That is coming from Extension and also the nutrition department on campus. They've got a wealth of information, including all of our fact sheets on food preservation as well. So check out Food Smart Colorado. And CSU Extension also made an app called Preserve Smart. So the little tomatoes you see here with the white check or the red and white checkers is that. So you can download the app or you can go to the website. And what that has is all of like the fact sheet information basically put on electronically. And what you can do is say you're at the farmer's market, there's a beautiful box of seconds of apples or peaches or pears or whatever. You can go to the website or the app and just right there, click on what fruit you're interested in preserving, and then it will pop up the methods that are available, like canning. It'll have recipes for you, and it will have the altitude adjustments already there for you, so you don't have to do that. It's a fantastic resource. But also the National Center for Home Food Preservation is where state extensions rely on information for. They're continually doing research that we can really feel happy about and distributing out to the community. And then there's a cookbook that they have published that goes along with that research. So the cookbook is called So Easy to Preserve, but all those recipes are available online on their website. So the Ball Blue Book, Complete Book of Home Preserving, that one's in my office today. I'm in my home office, but there is another one that's very similar to that. It's more of like a magazine format. This is a great one to look at. Ball is definitely a trusted source of researched recipes. The Pectin package inserts also are a great place to look for jams and jellies recipes. And then this one here, this one specifically is called Food in Jars by Marissa McClellan, and also Preserving by the Pint. She has several cookbooks that are available. This is one of the cookbooks that we allow for state fair competition. She's done a great amount of research. She follows USDA guidelines. But what I love about this book is that and Preserving by the Pint is small batches, 2 or 3 pints at a time, whereas a lot of the recipes that are called for in preserving are for much larger batches. So if you just want to kind of dip your toe in, you want to do a couple jars at a time, she's got some really great recipes in here. So I always want to mention that because there's so many preserving books out there and it's so hard to tell. So anything by Marissa McClellan, we do recommend, and people are using those recipes for state and county fairs, and they're fantastic, really creative recipes. So I mentioned this before, and I'm going to mention it again just to hammer this point home. You want to make sure that you're preparing all soft spreads in small batches. We do not recommend doubling recipes or tripling recipes just from a classic recipe that only has a set amount, because what you're doing is you're making a bigger surface area, right? When batches are doubled or tripled, the additional time that it takes for a mixture to come to a full rolling boil will expose the pectin to too much heat, and it will break down and it'll result in a runny jam or jelly, okay? The exception to that is using those calculators that I talked about that Ball offers, that pectin calculator, because they've done the exact science that you need, the adjustments that you need to make. But we just do not recommend doing it on your own because you're just not going to end up with a good product, okay? It's a lot of time and resources and effort to make these, home canned products. So we just want to make sure that you're doing as a good of a process as possible for you. And that's why we make those recommendations, okay? So I mentioned this before, it's gonna take a little bit of time to do a canning project. So make sure that you've got uninterrupted time, that you have time to prep, You have time for water to boil, to process, and then to cool down, at least maybe 3 or 4 hours. And then if you plan well, you're going to have a much more smooth and enjoyable process and project, really. So in order to do jams or jellies, we recommend the water bath method, obviously, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the equipment that you'll need is a water bath canner or a large pot with a lid and some kind of a jar rack. Now, if you are familiar with a water bath canner, they have like a wire jar rack, a wire rim on the inside that you can lift up out of the canner that separates the bottom of the jar from the bottom of the pot. If you don't have a wire rack, and let's say you just want to use a large pot, you just want to make sure that you have some kind of separation between the jar and the bottom of the rack. So what does that look like? So you could use something like a bunch of bands. You can zip tie them together and create like a trivet and then put your jars on top of that. If you have some kind of a metal trivet you want to use, give that a try. We've even seen like people rolling up aluminum foil and making a snake out of it and then curling it up and putting that using that as a trivet. So there's lots of different things you can do. You would need like a jelly bag if you're doing jelly, like I showed you earlier, jars and lids, a jar lifter. You can see there is a little blue and black and silver. It allows you to lift your jar out of the water without having to put your hand on it. A bubble freer, a funnel, a timer, and then other general prep food equipment. So things like a ladle and a kitchen towel, because you don't want to put your product on a cold kitchen counter. Okay, now I very quickly mentioned that we're using water bath canning. So if you're curious about that, the reason we use water bath canning is that it is safe, it's food safe for products that are acidic. So that's a pH of 4.6 or below. And that's typically used for something like fruits, pickles, acidified tomatoes, or jams and jellies, okay? On the other hand, pressure canning is used for things like low acid foods, so pH above 4.6. So things like vegetables, soups, broth, meats, poultry, beans, anything that is not acidic is a requirement for using a pressure canner, okay? Now, back to the water bath canner. You always want to inspect your jars for any defects before you use them. So make sure that the rims are nice and clean. There's no chips or anything like that. Any, defects in the glass that you can tell. And then you're going to fill your canner pot halfway with hot water and about to 180 degrees. You don't want to boil it. So the point of really starting this whole process is that you want your jars to be clean and you want them to be warm. So washing your jars beforehand is a really great option, just with soap and water. And then you're going to put them in your canning pot and put in there in the warm water until it's ready to fill. You can alternatively just wash and preheat your jars in the dishwasher and leave it closed until you're ready, okay? And then the lids, prepare your lids according to package direction. You used to have to sterilize these lids or keep them in boiling water or warm water. The product has changed. So you no longer have to sterilize or keep your jars or your lids, sterilized or warm, because the rubber seal on the inside is it's a more advanced technology. All you need to do is make sure that these are washed and dry and ready to go, which is one less step for you, which is great, okay? Now, your next step in the whole canning process is to make your recipe, right? So you're going to follow your recipe instructions, making sure everything is washed really well, that you add your sugar and your pectin and your acid exactly as specified. And you want to work quickly. You don't want to keep this boiling any longer than it should, because that gel formation is so critical in this type of product. You're going to bring things to a full rolling boil, and then you're going to have to skim off that foam off the top. A little tip though is you can add a teaspoon of butter or margarine if you want to make a vegan product in with the other ingredients, and that'll help reduce that foam, okay? Now, when your recipe is ready to go, you're going to remove all of your jars from the hot water or pull them out of your dishwasher. And then you're going to fill the jars with, using a funnel is really great for things like jams and jellies because it can get pretty messy. So use a funnel, pour your product in your jar, and then leave a 1/4 inch of headspace, okay? I'm going to talk about a little bit more about headspace in a moment, but you also want to make sure that you're using a bubble freer to remove air bubbles. So this can be something that can be purchased in like a canning kit, or I like to use a wooden chopstick as my bubble freer. We just don't recommend that you use metal in the ingredients itself or in the product itself, because you can react and you'll get a metallic taste. So get like a bubble freer or a chopstick, and then you're going to dip it down into the product a couple times to try to release the air bubbles, okay? And up to a 1/4 inch. So you can see here, I've got a jelly jar. So most of the recipes are going to call for jelly jars or the 8-ounce half-pint jars, which you see here. Now, a 1/4 inch, you can see, is almost all the way at the top. That's the least amount of headspace really that is recommended in home canning because this is the kind of product that it is most successful with. Some recipes will call up to 1 inch of headspace. So you can see that line is right there, so close to the top, okay? Now, once your jam goes in, you are going to wipe that rim using a clean, damp cloth or a paper towel to remove any kind of residue. You don't want any sticky residue because you don't want it to affect your seal. And then you're going to put your lid on your jar, and then you're going to put your band over the top of the lid. Now, fingertip tight is a little bit tricky, so I'd like to demonstrate it. So what you've got here is your band. I'm not going to use the strength of my whole hand. I'm only going to use the strength of my fingertips, okay? And I'm going to kind of twist it quickly until it reaches resistance, okay? So you can see here, I'm going to put it on correctly the first time. So it has reached resistance, and I have lifted my hand up, and I'm not taking the full strength of my hand and cranking it until it's as tight as it will go, okay? That's not fingertip tight. Now I actually cranked it so hard I had to take it off. Fingertip tight, again, is just letting it go on until it reaches resistance, and that's it. Now, the reason that we have to do that is air bubbles have to escape in processing. And then that helps, this band itself helps to keep the lid on and create a nice seal, okay? So it's a part of that technology of the lid and the band system, okay? Now, once you've filled all your jars, you've cleaned them, you've done the bubble freeing, you've put the lid on, you've put the band on, you've got all your jars ready to go, you're going to put them in the water bath canner. And I believe last time I counted, you can fit 10 of these into a water bath canning at the same time. The physical space is 10. So say you've got a couple recipes going on, 2 different recipes of 4 jars. You can do them at the same time if it calls for the same time, okay? You want to take your jar, put it into your water bath without tilting, because you just worked to create a nice, great, clean area, clean surface. You don't want to compromise it by potentially leaking some of those ingredients out, okay? And then once you've got all of your jars in your canner, you want to lower the rack into water, and then you want to make sure that the water covers the jars by at least 2 inches, 1 or 2 inches. If it starts to boil down, you need to add more boiling water. So this is a great opportunity to have like a kettle of water going at all times. During the process, you could quickly add it without changing the temperature of the water too much, okay? So you're going to then place your lid on the canner and bring it to a full rolling boil. Once it comes to that full rolling boil, then you set your timer, okay? So a lot of classic recipes for jams and jellies call for 10 minutes of time, okay? Or even 5 minutes, depending on what it is. However, back to the altitude adjustment, because everywhere we are is above altitude, you need to make an adjustment. So you can see here that this is a ball altitude chart, and it's current. You need to, let's say we're about 5,500 feet here in Fort Collins. Anywhere between 3,000 and 6,000 feet, we need to add 10 minutes processing time. Okay. And so that's a good rule of thumb. You can see here that it doesn't go above 10,000 feet. So I actually had somebody yesterday in this class ask me, what about 9,000 feet? You can can at 9,000 feet. It's just not recommended above 10. So you can see here, if you're canning at 10,000 or 9,000 feet, it's going to take considerable extra time. Okay. So just to make that consideration. So for instance, like if you take any CSU recipe, it will give you that chart automatically on every recipe that you see. So for instance, we have a Jellies fact sheet that you can go to on that Food Smart website. It'll give you that chart. And everywhere you look, you're going to see that chart because it's so important. But for instance, something like this, the Ball Blue Book, a recipe is not going to have that adjustment in it. It'll just give you like the 10 minutes that you need. And then in the front of the book, you're going to have this little chart that shows you, excuse me. And most often it'll say, make adjustments for altitude, just as a reminder. Okay. So after processing, you want to take off the lid, turn off the heat, set the time for another 5 minutes. And you don't want to take them out before then. So make sure that you're settling, let them settle for a little bit. And then you're going to remove the jars from the canner using an upright method. So you do not want to tilt those jars again, even though they're going to have a little bit of standing water. We don't want to compromise that seal. Take it out of the water bath canner, set it onto your countertop on a kitchen towel or a cooling rack to prevent jar breakage. You do not want a very hot product going onto a cold kitchen countertop, okay? And then you want to leave these jars undisturbed for 12 to 24 hours. Because it's rattling around, because there's air, a little bit of air coming out, these bands are going to loosen during processing. It is not a problem. You do not need to retighten these bands. We recommend that you don't. You actually are going to take them off for storage, and I'll mention that in a moment. But once the 24 hours has passed, you can check the lids for a seal by pressing in the middle of the lid. You can hold it up and look at it. It should be concave. You just don't want that to pop back up when you press on it, and you know you've got a good seal, okay? Now, sometimes jams or jellies can take up to 2 weeks to set. So citrus marmalades are the ones that we see that the most often with. So you want to make sure that your product has set before you make any changes if you think there's an issue, okay? So sometimes we do get questions about jams or jellies not setting. We will always ask, did you get it from a reliable source? Because maybe the quantities are wrong or the ingredients or the instructions were maybe not as reliable as we would like. If you have followed all the recommendations that we have talked about for this webinar, and you really would like to get that product the way that you want it, one option is to recook it, but you would need to add additional pectin and sugar and lemon juice. So the final product is probably not going to be exactly the way that you would like. It will be a different modified version of that. It is probably going to be a little bit tough or stiff due to that extra processing. So it's doable, but we typically will recommend using it for other uses. So putting it on ice cream or using it as a syrup or stirred in yogurt is a really great option. Using it as like a marinade for meat is another thing you could do. So think about that before you try re-canning it. And then I got a little bit ahead of myself. When you're done with your canning project, it's been a couple, a couple days. You want to take that screw band off, You want to clean the jar because often with jams and jellies, you are going to get a little bit of residue in the water, so they'll be a little bit sticky. And then make sure you're labeling the contents, the method, the date, because you're really going to get the best quality out of your product if you're going to use it within a year. So it's important to remember what you made and when you made it. Okay. And then we recommend storing in a cool, dry, dark place to keep that product as happy as possible. Okay. Now that is it for our for the slides that I have. So I'm going to stop the share and open up the floor for any questions that we have. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I do want to mention that I have a survey. Excuse me, I'm going to go back into the chat box. And I'm going to post a survey. If you don't mind, it would probably take you about 5 minutes, just a couple questions, to hear about your thoughts about today's webinar. I would love to hear from you. I would love to think about any suggestions that you might have or information that we missed. Please take the survey. We always love to hear from you. So with that, thank you for joining. If you don't have any questions, feel free to go. If you do have questions, you can either unmute your mic or you are welcome to add any questions into the chat box. Okay. Someone saying that they missed the basics of preserving. Yes, there is a recording. It is available on our website. So you can go to larimer.extension.org and find it there under the food preservation tab. If you have any issues, you have my email and I can send it directly to you. Okay.
Hi, can I ask you how long it's safe to go between the time you put the lid on and you put it in the water bath, in the boiling water?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So you should do it all in one setting. So it's not a matter of minutes. You have enough time to fill all of your jars, to put all the lids on, to put all the bands on, and then put it in the canner. We just recommend that you work quickly and not, make your product and then leave the kitchen for a couple of hours and then, come back and then start your water bath canner. So just all in one setting is enough time that you'll need.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So in our chat box, we have someone asking, I was making crabapple jelly last year and it hardened too much. Any tips to prevent that? I was doing the spoon sheet test. So I imagine I have not made crabapple jelly personally yet, but I do know that the crab apples have a lot of pectin in them. So I would recommend probably using crab apples that are more ripe than they are unripe. So if there's a way that you can tell, maybe after you harvest them, keep them for a little while before you can them to ripen them up a bit. And you also might check into, just go to like State Extension, crabapple jelly, because I'm not sure that we specifically have that recipe on our fact sheet. I don't have them all memorized, but you could see if there's any tips specifically for crabapple jelly from a different state extension. Okay. Any other questions before we log off? Oh, sorry. And I was talking about the survey, but I didn't give it to you. Okay, here it is in the chat box. I have just posted the survey link if you're willing to go take a look at that. Thank you so much. I do have another question. I followed a recipe for choke cherry jam and I did the slow boil method. It hardened like candy. Oh my goodness. That is really interesting. I wonder also if it took too long. And I do believe that choke cherry jam is another one of those things that have a lot of pectin in it. And I would recommend also going back to a reliable resource, okay? And make sure that you have the right kind of recipe. Because it looks like you may have had maybe the wrong ratio of ingredients and maybe cooked a little bit too long. All right. Have you used reusable canning lids like Tatler or Harvest Guard? That's a great question. So we actually, as Extension, do not recommend reusable canning lids. Use reusable canning lids because they are difficult to know when they will start to fail. There's not like a number of times that's been researched that says reusable canning lids are good for 5 or 10 or 20 times. At some point, you're probably going to get seal failure, and we just don't know what that number is. And so we don't recommend using that. Really, the long-term research has shown that single-use lids are the best for really expected quality. Okay. Okay, well, with that, I'm going to stop the recording. And thank you so much for joining us today. And if there's a couple more questions, I will be happy to stay on and ask them. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.